A deaf woman rushed into a crowded coffee shop, her face filled with fear and her hands trembling. She kept making signs to people at different tables, asking for help, but no one understood her, no one paid attention to her. Behind her, a man who had been following her was moving closer, wearing a cold smile. She was almost in despair when she suddenly received a response in sign language from a man sitting by the window. What she did not know was that this stranger that night would not only save her life but also help her escape a dark plot and begin a chain of events that would change both of their lives forever. Before we dive in this story, let us know where you're watching from. We love to hear your thought. In the fading light of an autumn evening in Willow Creek, Oregon, a young woman was running for her life, and no one knew who she was. The woman being hunted that night had enough money to buy the entire town. She had connections in boardrooms across 3 continents. She had lawyers, security teams, and resources most people couldn't imagine. And none of it mattered, because Elena Brooks was deaf, and the man following her knew she couldn't scream for help. Elena stepped out of the grocery store on Main Street, a small paper bag tucked under her arm. Milk, bread, nothing special. She'd been living in Willow Creek for 3 months now, keeping a low profile, wearing simple clothes that cost less than her old handbags. No designer labels, no diamond studs, just a woman trying to disappear. She had gotten good at reading the world without sound, the flicker of shadows on pavement, the way streetlights reflected off car windows, the subtle vibration through her feet when someone walked too close behind her. That's how she noticed him, Marcus Reed, gray hoodie, cold eyes, standing across the street like he had every right to be there. Elena's chest tightened. This wasn't the first time. 2 weeks now. 2 weeks of seeing that same figure outside the bookstore where she worked part-time, at the farmer's market, near her apartment building, always watching, always patient. She had dealt with dangerous people before, men who manipulated markets and destroyed careers without blinking. She knew what predators looked like, but this was different. Those men had wanted her money, her connections, her signature on contracts. This man wanted something else entirely, something that made her skin crawl every time she caught him staring. Elena reached into her pocket and felt her blood turn cold. Nothing. Her phone. She had left it charging on her nightstand. It was supposed to be a quick errand. 10 minutes. What could possibly happen? God, she was so stupid, so careless. After everything she had learned, after every lesson life had beaten into her, she had let her guard down for 10 minutes, and now she was paying for it. Her hand found the metal card buried deep in her bag, the one with the Helixon Group logo embossed in silver. Her old life, her old identity, the thing she was running from almost as much as the man in the gray hoodie. She shoved it back down and started walking faster. Marcus crossed the street. Elena turned left toward the main road. More people, more lights, safety in numbers. He matched her pace perfectly. She couldn't hear if he was getting closer. She couldn't call out for help. She couldn't even know if she was screaming. The anger hit her harder than the fear. Anger at herself for being careless. Anger at a world that had never bothered to learn how to communicate with people like her. Anger at whoever sent this man, because deep down she knew. This wasn't random. This was too patient, too calculated. Someone had found her. The street was emptying as darkness crept in. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs as she searched desperately for anyone who might help. A young woman walked past, eyes glued to her phone. Elena rushed toward her, hands moving rapidly in sign language. "Please help me. Someone is following me. I'm scared." The woman looked up, startled. Her eyes darted to Elena's moving hands, then to her face, and confusion quickly shifted to discomfort. She clutched her purse tighter and hurried away without a word. Elena felt like she'd been slapped. She spotted an elderly man locking up his shop. Maybe he would understand. Maybe he would call for help. "Please, that man is following me. Call the police." The old man squinted at her hands, then shook his head sadly. He pointed to his ear, said something she couldn't read on his lips, patted her shoulder kindly, and walked away toward his car. Tears burned in Elena's eyes. She didn't blame them. Not really. She blamed the system that never taught them. The schools that treated sign language like an inconvenience. The world that expected deaf people to adapt rather than meeting them halfway. She remembered a board meeting 2 years ago. A room full of executives who hung on her every gesture, who waited silently while an interpreter translated her words, who wouldn't dare interrupt Elena Brooks, co-founder of Helixon Group. Now she couldn't get a single person to look at her for more than 3 seconds. The irony was almost funny. Almost. She glanced back. Marcus had stopped pretending. He stood under a street lamp, staring directly at her. A slow, terrible smile spread across his face. He knew she was trapped in a nightmare where she could see everyone but no one could see her. That smile told her everything. He was enjoying this, the hunt, the fear, The way she scrambled for help that wouldn't come. Elena's hands trembled, her vision blurred with tears, and then she saw it. The warm glow of Maple Street Cafe spilled onto the darkening sidewalk. Through the large windows, Elena could see people inside, families, couples, someone reading a book by the counter. She pushed through the door so hard that every head in the place turned. A waitress called out something, probably asking if she was okay, but Elena was already moving. She approached the first table she saw, a middle-aged woman with a cup of tea and a crossword puzzle. "Please, I need help. A man is following me. I'm deaf. Please help me." The woman's eyes went wide with alarm but not understanding. She held up her hands helplessly and looked around, clearly hoping someone else would step in. Elena moved to the next table. A group of college students looked up from their laptops. Their young faces reflected confusion and uncertainty. "Can anyone understand me? Please, I'm in danger." One of the students pulled out his phone, maybe trying to find a translation app, but his friends were already shifting uncomfortably in their seats, clearly not knowing how to respond to this panicked woman making gestures they couldn't comprehend. Elena felt the last threads of hope slipping through her fingers like sand. "I could buy this entire building," she thought bitterly, "but I can't buy a single person who understands me." The cafe door opened behind her with a soft chime. She didn't have to turn around to know who had just walked in. She could feel it, that cold presence, that hunter's patience. Marcus Reed was inside now. The last safe space was no longer safe. For a split second, Elena's mind raced through options. She had taken self-defense classes. She knew where to strike to cause maximum damage. But there were children in here, families. She couldn't risk escalating things, couldn't risk someone innocent getting hurt. Through her tears, through the blur of panic and desperation, she scanned the room one final time. And that's when she saw them. A man sat by the window with a little girl, maybe 5 years old. The girl had her hair in 2 messy pigtails and was arranging chicken nuggets into a smiley face on her plate, but it was the man who caught Elena's attention. Unlike everyone else who had looked at her with confusion or pity or discomfort, this man was watching her with something different in his eyes. Concern, focus, understanding. Something about the way he was looking at her made Elena move toward him. Desperation, instinct, or maybe something else entirely. She approached his table. This time her hands moved slower, clearer, more controlled. The frantic desperation of earlier replaced by something more deliberate. "Please help me. That man has been following me for weeks. I don't have my phone. I can't call for help." For a moment, time seemed to stop. The little girl looked up from her chicken nuggets with curious eyes. The noise of the cafe faded into nothing, though for Elena it had always been nothing. And then something happened that Elena didn't expect. The man didn't jump up, didn't make a scene, didn't wave for help or look around nervously like everyone else had. Instead, Daniel noticed the way her hands trembled before she even reached his table. Not the dramatic shaking of panic, but the quiet kind, the kind that comes from someone who has learned to survive alone. He had seen that tremor before, in his brother's hands during their childhood, when kids at school made fun of Micah for being different, in his wife's hands the night she told him something was wrong with her heart. Some kinds of fear don't scream, they whisper. He didn't ask who she was, didn't ask why she was running. He didn't need to. If he had known who she really was, he might have hesitated, but he didn't, and that made all the difference. Without a word, Daniel shifted his chair, positioning himself between Elena and the door. Then he reached over and pulled an empty chair closer to Lily, angling it so Elena would have her back to the wall. A small gesture, simple, but to Elena it felt like someone had just built a fortress around her. Lily looked up from her chicken nuggets, curious but not scared. Daniel gave his daughter a small nod, the kind that said it's okay, Daddy's handling this, and she went back to arranging her food, trusting him completely. Only then did Daniel raise his hands. "I understand you," he signed, slowly and clearly, making sure she could catch every word. "You're safe now. I'm going to help you. What's your name?" Elena's entire body sagged. Her knees nearly gave out. For a moment her hands couldn't form words at all. They just trembled in the air between them, suspended in pure, overwhelming relief. Someone understood her. Someone saw her. She wasn't invisible anymore. But even through the relief, old instincts kicked in. The instincts of a woman who had been betrayed by people she trusted, who had learned the hard way that kindness often came with a price tag. "Why do you know sign language?" she asked, her movements sharp with suspicion she couldn't quite hide. Daniel didn't flinch at the edge in her question, didn't look offended or pull back. He just answered, steady and calm. "My brother is deaf. I've been signing my whole life." No dramatic story, no attempt to impress her, just the truth, offered simply. Elena studied his face, looked for the lie, the hidden agenda, the calculation behind the kindness. She had spent years in boardrooms reading people who smiled while they plotted. She knew what deception looked like. She found nothing but steady, genuine concern. And something else, A quiet patience, like he was willing to wait as long as it took for her to feel safe. "I'm Elena," she finally signed, tears spilling down her cheeks. "My name is Elena. I'm Daniel," he replied. Then he glanced at the man in the gray hoodie still lurking near the door, and his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. When he looked back at Elena, his hands moved with quiet conviction. "Stay right here with me and my daughter. I won't let anything happen to you." He turned to the little girl. "Lily, honey, this nice lady is going to sit with us for a little while, okay? She's having a very scary day and we're going to help her." "Okay, Daddy." Lily's face became suddenly serious in the way children do when they sense something important is happening. "Is a bad guy being mean to her?" "Something like that, sweetheart. I need you to stay right here and be very brave. Can you do that for Daddy?" Lily nodded solemnly, her little hands protectively clutching her plate of chicken nuggets like they might be needed as weapons. Daniel guided Elena into the seat next to Lily, positioning himself so he could see both the door and the man in the gray hoodie. "I'm going to tell them to call the police," he signed. "Don't worry, he's not going to touch you." He walked directly toward the counter where a young barista named Stephanie was wiping down the espresso machine. His voice was low but urgent, every word deliberate. "Call the police right now. That man by the door has been stalking the woman at my table. She's deaf and doesn't have her phone. She's been trying to get help but no one understood her. Don't let him leave." Stephanie's face went pale, but she was already reaching for the phone under the counter. Daniel returned to the table and sat down across from Elena. He signed to her, his movements calm and steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "The police are on their way. Can you tell me more about what's been happening?" Elena's hands were still shaking but she managed to sign back, each gesture laden with weeks of accumulated fear. "He's been following me for 2 weeks. Outside my work at the bookstore. At the grocery store. Outside my apartment building. I reported it to the police but they said they couldn't do anything without evidence. Today was my day off. I just went out to get a few things. I didn't bring my phone. I didn't think I'd need it, and then I saw him again. He followed me for blocks. I tried to get help but no one understood me. No one could hear me." The last sign carried a weight that went beyond the physical act of hearing. Daniel's jaw tightened. He glanced toward Marcus, who was still standing near the door, pretending to look at his phone. But there was something nervous in his posture now. He had noticed the barista on the phone. He had noticed Daniel's protective stance. Elena watched Marcus too, and something about the way she observed him, calculated, almost clinical, struck Daniel as odd. This woman wasn't just scared, she was analyzing, like she had seen predators before, like she knew exactly what kind of man Marcus Reed was. Lily tugged on Daniel's sleeve. "Daddy, why is the pretty lady talking with her hands?" "She's deaf, sweetheart. That means she can't hear sounds the way we do, so she talks with her hands instead. And I learned how to understand her a long time ago because Uncle Micah talks the same way." Lily's eyes went wide with wonder rather than confusion. "Like Uncle Micah? That's so cool." She turned to Elena with the pure, unfiltered compassion that only children possess. "Don't be sad, pretty lady. My daddy is the best helper in the whole wide world. He even fixed my teddy bear's arm when it fell off, and now Mr. Snuggles is good as new." Daniel signed to Elena what Lily had said, and Elena let out a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. Something beautifully human and broken and healing all at once. "Your daughter is precious," Elena signed. "She's my whole world," Daniel replied. And something in the way his hands formed those words told Elena there was a story there, a deep one. But that was for another time. The next few minutes felt like hours stretched thin. The cafe had grown quieter, the normal chatter subdued as people sensed something serious was happening. The elderly woman with the crossword puzzle was watching nervously. The college students had stopped typing. Marcus must have realized something was wrong because he started moving toward the door, trying to slip out unnoticed, but before he could escape, 2 police officers walked in. "Excuse me, sir," one of them said, blocking the exit. "We need to ask you a few questions." Marcus's face cycled through emotions. Calm, annoyed, then something almost desperate. "I haven't done anything wrong, I'm just getting coffee." "Then you won't mind answering a few questions." The other officer approached Daniel's table. Daniel stood, positioning himself between the officer and Elena, and began interpreting everything that was said. It turned out Marcus Reed's name set off alarms the moment they ran his information. Prior arrests for harassment and stalking in 2 different states, Missouri, Kentucky. A pattern of behavior that painted a picture of a man who had done this before, who would do it again if given the chance. But here's where Elena's blood ran cold. When the officer mentioned the states, mentioned the pattern, something clicked in her memory. A file she had seen once, buried in Helixson's security database. A name flagged for potential recruitment, Marcus Reed, former surveillance contractor, terminated for boundary issues. She had seen his name before, and that meant this wasn't random. This wasn't coincidence. Someone had sent him. "Ma'am, you're very lucky," one of the officers said, looking at Elena even though she couldn't hear him. Daniel interpreted, his face grave. "If you hadn't found someone who could communicate for you tonight, well, we've been looking for Mr. Reed in connection to another case. He's dangerous." The officer didn't finish the thought. He didn't need to. Everyone in the cafe understood what he wasn't saying. As they led Marcus out in handcuffs, the cafe erupted into murmurs. Several people who hadn't understood Elena earlier approached her now with apologies, with offers of comfort, with guilty faces that said, "I'm sorry I didn't help you," but Elena barely noticed them. Her eyes were fixed on Marcus as he was led past the window, and just before he disappeared from view, he turned his head and looked directly at her, and smiled, like this wasn't over, like this was just the beginning. The police station was exactly as cold and impersonal as every other police station Elena had ever been in. Fluorescent lights, uncomfortable chairs, coffee that tasted like sadness. But Daniel was there, translating, interpreting, making sure she wasn't invisible in yet another room full of people who couldn't understand her. The detective handling her case asked the standard questions. How long had she noticed Marcus following her? Did she have any idea why he might target her? Had she received any threats? Elena answered carefully, truthfully, but carefully. She mentioned the bookstore, the grocery store, the 2 weeks of feeling hunted. She did not mention Helixon. She did not mention her real identity. She did not mention the metal card still buried at the bottom of her bag. When the detective asked for her occupation, she said, "Part-time bookstore employee." When he asked for emergency contacts, she hesitated. Then she looked at Daniel. "Can I give your number?" She signed. "I don't have anyone else here." Daniel didn't hesitate. Of course. What Elena didn't say was that she could have had a team of lawyers here within the hour, that she could have had private security sweeping the entire town by morning, that she had resources most people couldn't imagine. But resources hadn't protected her tonight. Daniel had. After the police station there was paperwork, a restraining order to file, victim advocacy resources to review. One of the officers commented to his partner, not realizing Daniel could hear, that the deaf woman seemed remarkably composed for someone who had just been stalked. Most victims are a mess. She's filling out forms like she's done this before. Daniel noticed but didn't say anything. He filed it away, along with a dozen other small observations he had made that night. The way Elena carried herself, the expensive-looking card he had glimpsed in her bag, the way she had watched Marcus being arrested, not with relief but with calculation. There was more to Elena Brooks than met the eye, but that was her story to tell, in her own time. Over the following weeks, Elena found herself drawn back to Maple Street Cafe, not because of Daniel, she told herself, because the cafe was the place where she had survived, where she had been seen. It had nothing to do with the kind-eyed man who signed fluently and had a daughter who was learning to say butterfly with her hands. Nothing at all. But while Elena kept telling herself these lies, she was busy doing things she would never mention. The first call happened 3 days after that night in the cafe. Elena sat in her small apartment, staring at Daniel's number in her phone, the one he had given her for emergencies. She didn't call him. Instead, she called someone else. An old contact from her Helixon days, someone who owed her a favor. "I need information about Willow Creek Elementary School," she said, her voice rusty from disuse. "Their funding situation. Any programs at risk of being cut." 2 weeks later, Daniel mentioned casually during one of their Saturday cafe visits that something strange had happened at work. "The district approved our inclusive education program," he signed, his face puzzled but happy. "We've been fighting for funding for 2 years." And suddenly, out of nowhere, an anonymous donor covered the entire thing. 3 years of guaranteed support. "That's wonderful," Elena signed back, her expression carefully neutral. "Lily will benefit from that. We all will. I just wish I knew who to thank." Elena just smiled and changed the subject. The second thing happened a month later. Daniel had been stressed about Lily's upcoming specialist appointment, a pediatric audiologist in Portland who was supposed to be the best in the region. The waiting list was 8 months long. Daniel had been calling every week, hoping for a cancellation. Then out of nowhere, the clinic called him. "We had an opening," the receptionist said. "Someone specifically requested that Lily Hart be moved up the list. You're scheduled for next Tuesday." Daniel was so shocked he forgot to ask who had made the request. At the appointment, the audiologist, a kind woman with 30 years of experience, spent 2 hours with Lily instead of the standard 45 minutes. She ran tests that weren't covered by Daniel's insurance, tests he hadn't even known existed. When he asked about the bill, the receptionist looked confused. "It's been taken care of," she said. "Prepaid. Anonymous." Daniel drove home in a daze, holding paperwork that would have cost him 3 months' salary. He never questioned it, never connected the dots, just thanked God, or luck, or whatever force in the universe had decided to help his little girl. And then there was the hearing aid. Lily's old one was functional but outdated, a basic model that Daniel had bought second-hand because the new ones cost more than his car. It worked, but it whistled sometimes, and Lily had learned to hide her embarrassment when other kids noticed. One Saturday at the cafe, Lily was showing Elena her magic ear when Elena noticed the model. Noticed the way Lily unconsciously covered it with her hair when other customers walked by. Elena didn't say anything. But the next week a package arrived at Daniel's apartment. Inside was a state-of-the-art hearing aid, the kind that cost thousands of dollars, the kind that connected to phones and tablets, the kind that came in sparkly purple because someone had known it was Lily's favorite color. The note inside said only, "For a brave girl learning to speak with her hands." Daniel read the note 5 times, looked at the hearing aid, looked at his daughter's face already lighting up at the sparkly purple. "Daddy, it's so pretty, can I wear it, please?" He didn't know who had sent it. Didn't know how they knew Lily's favorite color. Didn't know why the universe kept sending these small miracles his way. But somewhere in the back of his mind a thought was forming, a connection he wasn't quite ready to make. Elena meanwhile sat in her apartment that same evening, looking at the receipt on her laptop. She had paid for everything through shell companies and anonymous trusts, the way she used to move money when she wanted to fund something without her name attached. Some things she believed didn't need credit. Some kindnesses were better left unsigned. This wasn't charity. This was gratitude. Besides, Daniel would never accept help if he knew it came from her. She had seen the pride in his eyes when he talked about providing for Lily on his own. The quiet dignity of a man who worked hard and asked for nothing. She wasn't going to take that from him, but she could make the road a little easier, could remove obstacles he didn't even know existed, could be the invisible hand that cleared his path, even if he never knew she was there. It was the least she could do for the man who had saved her life without asking for anything in return. But somehow, Saturday evenings became a tradition. Elena would show up around 6, and there would be Daniel and Lily at their usual table by the window. Lily would bounce with excitement the moment she saw Miss Elena, eager to show off the new signs she had learned that week. "Friend," Lily would sign carefully, her little fingers not quite getting the shape right. "Almost," Elena would reply, gently adjusting Lily's hand position. "Like this." And Lily would beam with pride so bright it could light up the entire cafe. Daniel watched these exchanges with something warm growing in his chest. He hadn't planned on raising a child alone. 2 years ago when Amelia died, everyone told him to take time off, grieve properly, let family help with Lily while he put himself back together, but Daniel couldn't do it. Couldn't hand his daughter to someone else while he fell apart in private. So he went back to work 3 weeks after the funeral, teaching 3rd grade with eyes still red from crying in the school parking lot before first bell. The principal had offered him a promotion last year. Assistant administrator, better salary, regular hours, but it meant less time in the classroom, more time in meetings, and Lily would have to stay in after-school care until 6 every evening. He said no. His brother Micah kept telling him about a job opening at a private school 2 hours away, nearly double the pay, great benefits, think about Lily's future. Micah had signed. The medical bills aren't going to get smaller. He wasn't wrong. Lily's hearing tests, the specialist appointments, the future hearing aids, none of it was cheap. Daniel's teacher's salary stretched thin every month. He drove a 12-year-old car because a new one meant choosing between car payments and Lily's speech therapy sessions. He hadn't bought himself new clothes in 2 years. Date nights were a distant memory even before the concept of dating again had crossed his mind. But that private school was 2 hours away. 2 hours of commuting meant 2 hours less with his daughter every day. 2 hours less of helping her with homework, of reading bedtime stories, of watching her arrange chicken nuggets into smiley faces at their favorite cafe. Every decision he made revolved around Lily, and somehow that never felt like a sacrifice, just a choice, the only choice that made sense. He had accepted somewhere in the quiet hours of sleepless nights that this was his life now, work, Lily. Maybe someday, when she was older, when the grief had faded into something manageable, he would think about himself again. But now, watching Elena teach his daughter how to sign butterfly with patient hands and a smile that reached her eyes, watching Lily light up in a way she hadn't since her mother died, Daniel felt something shift, something warm, something unexpected, something he wasn't quite ready to name. "Thank you," he signed to Elena one evening, after Lily had exhausted herself practicing signs and fallen asleep against his shoulder, "for being so patient with her." "You don't have to do this." "I want to," Elena replied. "She reminds me of myself at that age, before I understood that being deaf made me different, when I just thought everyone talked with their hands." "When did you lose your hearing?" 7. Elena's hands paused for a moment. "I woke up one morning and the world was silent. No birds, no cars, no sound of my mother making breakfast." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I thought I had died." Daniel didn't know what to say to that, so he just reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Elena looked at their joined hands for a long moment, then she squeezed back. It happened one evening, 4 months after they'd met. Lily had fallen asleep in the booth, her head resting on Daniel's lap. The cafe was nearly empty. The soft music playing overhead created a bubble of privacy around their table. "Can I ask you something?" Elena signed. "You don't have to answer if it's too personal. You can ask me anything." Lily mentioned her mommy once. She said her mommy lives in heaven with the angels now. Daniel's hands stilled for a moment, then he took a deep breath and began to sign. Her name was Amelia. We were high school sweethearts, one of those ridiculously young love stories that somehow actually worked. We got married at 22, had Lily at 33. She was... His hands paused, searching for the right signs. She was the kind of person who made everyone around her better, kinder, happier. Elena waited patiently, giving him space. She had a heart defect, something she'd had since birth but never caused problems, until it did. One day she was dancing with Lily in our kitchen, laughing at some silly song on the radio. 2 weeks later, I was standing in a cemetery, holding our daughter's hand, trying to explain why mommy wasn't coming home. "I'm so sorry," Elena signed, her eyes glistening. "It's been 2 years. Some days are better than others, but Lily..." He looked down at his sleeping daughter, brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Lily saved me. She gave me a reason to keep going when I didn't think I could. Every time I look at her I see Amelia's smile, Amelia's laugh, Amelia's big heart, and I know I have to be enough for both of us. You're an amazing father," Elena signed. "Anyone can see how loved Lily is. You're not just enough, you're everything she needs." Something in Daniel's chest loosened at those words. Something that had been wound tight for 2 years finally began to breathe again. "What about you?" he signed. "You mentioned losing your mother. 2 years ago." Elena's hands moved more slowly now, weighed down by memory. "Severe stroke. She was only 53. It was just the two of us. My father left when I was young. Couldn't handle having a deaf daughter." Daniel's expression darkened with anger on her behalf, but he stayed silent, letting her continue. "My mother learned sign language for me. She became my advocate, my interpreter, my best friend. When she died, I lost the one person in the world who truly understood me. Until now." Daniel signed. And something passed between them that didn't need words or signs. A recognition, a connection, a sense that maybe, just maybe, they had been brought together for a reason neither of them could have predicted. What Elena didn't say was that she had spent $3 million funding stroke research in the year after her mother's death. That she had personally called the heads of 4 hospitals demanding answers. That all her money, all her power hadn't saved the one person who mattered most. Some things, she was learning, money couldn't fix, but maybe, just maybe, other things could. On a quiet Tuesday evening after Lily had gone to bed, Daniel sat across from Elena in his living room. There was a heaviness in his eyes that Elena had seen glimpses of before but never fully understood. A shadow that crossed his face sometimes when he watched Lily playing. A tightness in his jaw when anyone asked about the future. "There's something I need to tell you," he signed. "Something I should have told you a long time ago, but I didn't know how. I was afraid." Elena's heart tightened with sudden worry. "What is it?" Daniel took a deep breath, his hands trembling slightly as he began to sign. 6 months before I met you. Before that night in the cafe. I took Lily to the doctor. She had been having trouble hearing her teachers at preschool. I thought maybe it was ear infections. Kids get those all the time, right? Simple, treatable." He paused, his jaw working as he fought to maintain composure. "They ran tests, a lot of tests, hearing tests, genetic tests, scans, and they found something." Elena felt her chest constrict, already dreading what was coming. "Lily has a progressive genetic condition, something Amelia carried but never knew about. It never manifested in her, but she passed it to Lily, the doctors said. They said she'll likely lose her hearing completely by the time she's a teenager, maybe sooner. They can't know exactly when, but it's inevitable. My little girl is going to go deaf." The words hung in the air between them, heavy and terrible and heartbreaking. Elena thought of Lily, bright, bubbly, beautiful Lily, who sang silly songs in the car, who giggled at cartoon voices, who called out "Daddy, watch" every time she learned something new. "That's why she's learning sign language," Elena signed, the realization washing over her in waves. "That's why you've been teaching her. You're preparing her." Daniel nodded, tears slipping down his cheeks now, his composure finally breaking. "I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want you to think I was only with you because of what you could offer her, because that's not true. I fell in love with you, Elena, everything about you. But I also know that Lily is going to need someone who understands what she's about to go through, someone who can show her that being deaf doesn't mean her life is over, that she can still be happy, that she can still be whole." He looked at her with raw, devastating vulnerability. "I'm terrified, Elena. I'm terrified of watching my little girl lose something so precious and not being able to stop it. I'm terrified of not being enough for her when it happens. I learned sign language for my brother, but this is different. This is my baby. This is my whole world, and I don't know how to prepare her for a silence she's never known, for a world that might not understand her, for all the struggles I've watched you face. I don't know how to save her from this." Elena was crying too now, but she reached across and took Daniel's hands in hers, stilling them. Then she pulled back and signed slowly and deliberately, making sure he understood every single word. "When I was 7 years old, I woke up one morning and the world was silent. No birds singing outside my window, no cars driving past, no sound of my mother making breakfast in the kitchen. I screamed, but I couldn't hear my own voice. I thought I had died. I thought I was trapped in some kind of nightmare that I'd never wake up from." She paused, steadying herself against the memories. "For years I grieved. I grieved for music I would never hear again, for laughter, for my mother's voice reading me bedtime stories, for all the sounds I didn't even know I would miss until they were gone. I was angry. I was lost. I felt broken." Her hands moved with more intensity now. "But then I discovered something. I discovered that silence has its own kind of beauty. I discovered that my hands could speak louder and more eloquently than my voice ever did. I discovered that being deaf didn't make me less, it just made me different. It gave me a different perspective, a different way of experiencing the world, a different kind of strength." She squeezed his hands again, her eyes fierce with conviction. "Lily is going to grieve, and that's okay. That's healthy. That's human. But she's also going to discover a whole new world, a world I can show her. I can teach her that silence isn't emptiness. I can teach her how to listen with her eyes, how to speak with her hands, how to feel music through vibrations in her chest. I can teach her that the deaf community is beautiful and vibrant and full of people who will understand her completely. I can teach her that she will never ever be alone." Tears were streaming down both their faces now, and most importantly, Elena continued, "I can show her what you've been terrified she wouldn't see, that she can still be happy, she can still fall in love, she can still achieve her dreams, she can still be whole, because I am whole, Daniel. My deafness doesn't define me, it's just part of who I am, and Lily's deafness won't define her either." Daniel broke down completely. He pulled Elena into his arms and held her like she was the only thing keeping him from shattering into a million pieces. When he finally pulled back, he signed with shaking hands, "I thought I saved you that night in the cafe. But I think," Elena smiled through her tears, "maybe we were sent to save each other." 6 months after the cafe, everything was finally starting to feel normal. Good, even. Like the nightmare with Marcus Reed was just a bad dream fading in the morning light. Then the envelope arrived. Elena recognized the law firm's letterhead immediately. Harrison and Cole, the same firm that had represented Helixson Group for 15 years. Her hands trembled as she opened it. "You are hereby summoned to appear for a deposition regarding the ongoing investigation of Marcus Reed." Standard language. But attached was a second letter. From a company she had never heard of, Sentinel Data Solutions. "We are prepared to offer a comprehensive personal security package in exchange for your cooperation in resolving this matter quietly. Please contact us at your earliest convenience to discuss terms." Elena stared at the letter for a long time. "Resolve this matter quietly, in exchange for security. In other words, drop the charges, or else." That night she showed Daniel both letters. "This doesn't make sense," Daniel signed, his brow furrowed. "Why would a data security company care about a stalking case?" "Because it's not just a stalking case," Elena replied. Her hands were steady, but her eyes were hard. "Someone sent Marcus Reed. He wasn't a random predator who picked me out of a crowd. He was hired." "Hired? By who?" "I don't know yet. That was a lie." Elena had her suspicions, dark suspicions that went back years, to decisions she had made when she thought she was changing the world. "But I'm going to find out." The next day a man appeared at the bookstore where Elena worked. Expensive suit, perfect hair, smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Miss Brooks?" He spoke and signed simultaneously, fluent, practiced. "My name is Jonathan Reeves. I represent Sentinel Data Solutions. I was hoping we could have a conversation." Elena's coworker Maria looked between them nervously. "Do you need me to?" "I'm fine," Elena said, her voice rusty from disuse. She rarely spoke aloud anymore, but she wanted this man to know she could. "We can talk outside." In the alley behind the bookstore, away from prying eyes, Jonathan Reeves dropped the pleasant facade. "Let's be direct," he signed. "You have evidence that could be damaging to certain interests. We would prefer that evidence not come to light. In exchange for your silence, we can guarantee your safety, truly guarantee it. Not like the police, who clearly failed to protect you. Who sent Marcus Reed? That's not relevant. It's the only thing that's relevant.
Jonathan's smile flickered. "You're making this more complicated than it needs to be, Miss Brooks. You're a smart woman. You know how these things work. Some battles aren't worth fighting. Some enemies are too big to defeat. Take the settlement. Move on with your life. You have a good thing going here. The school teacher, his charming daughter. Why risk all of that?" Elena felt ice in her veins. He knew about Daniel. He knew about Lily. "If you think threatening them will make me back down," she signed slowly, "you don't know me at all. I know exactly who you are, Miss Brooks." Jonathan's eyes glittered with something cold. Or should I say, Miss Elena Thornton, co-founder of Helixson Group, net worth approximately $2.3 billion. Elena's expression didn't change, but her heart was racing. "There's the reaction I was looking for," Jonathan signed, satisfied. "We'll be in touch." He walked away, leaving Elena standing in the alley with her secrets crumbling around her. That night, Elena told Daniel everything. They sat in his living room after Lily went to bed, and Elena signed the story she had buried for 3 years. "My name isn't Elena Brooks, it's Elena Thornton. 12 years ago, I co-founded a technology company called Helixson Group. We developed accessibility software for deaf and hard of hearing users, video relay services, real-time captioning, tools that were supposed to make the world more inclusive." She paused, gathering herself. "The company grew. Fast, too fast. We took on investors who cared more about profit than mission. And then," Elena's hands formed the word like it tasted bitter. "Turns out the same technology that helps deaf people communicate can also be used to monitor them, to track them, to study their behavior patterns without consent. My co-founder Victor Hale saw the potential. He started selling our user data to corporations, to governments. He said it was harmless, just analytics, just research, but it wasn't. No, it wasn't." Elena's eyes went dark. "He was using deaf users as test subjects, studying how people communicate without sound, developing surveillance systems that could work in silent environments. And when I found out, when I tried to stop him," she made a cutting motion, "he pushed me out, used the board to remove me, painted me as unstable, said my deafness made me emotionally compromised." Daniel's hands clenched into fists. "That's disgusting. That's business." Elena signed bitterly. "I walked away with money but no power, no control over what I had helped create. I've been living under a different name ever since, trying to figure out how to take him down without destroying myself in the process. And Marcus Reed, hired by Victor, has to be. Marcus was in Helixson's database as a potential contractor years ago, someone Victor could use for discreet work." She shuddered. "I don't know if Victor wanted to scare me into silence or make me disappear entirely, but I know he's the one pulling the strings." Daniel was quiet for a long moment, processing everything. "Why didn't you tell me before?" "Because I didn't want you to look at me differently." Elena's hands faltered. "I didn't want to be the billionaire hiding in a small town. I wanted to be just Elena, the woman you met in a cafe, the woman Lily calls Miss Elena. I wanted to be normal, Elena." Daniel reached out and took her hands, stilling them. "Nothing about you is normal. You're extraordinary. And I'm not going anywhere." He meant it. Elena could see it in his eyes, feel it in his steady grip, but she also knew what was coming. Victor Hale didn't lose, ever, and she had just put everyone she loved in his crosshairs.
It started with a news article, "Billionaire heiress living double life in small town using disability as shield." Someone had leaked Elena's real identity to the press. The story painted her as a fraud, a manipulator, a wealthy woman playing poor while plotting against her former business partner. They twisted everything, made her advocacy work look like exploitation, made her relationship with Daniel look calculated. Sources say Miss Thornton targeted a single father with a soon-to-be deaf daughter, possibly to gather human interest material for future lawsuits against Helixson Group. Elena threw her phone across the room when she read that. But the articles were just the beginning. Within a week her bank accounts were frozen. Suspicious activity, the bank claimed, pending investigation. Allegations tied to an ongoing federal investigation triggered an automatic freeze, automatic, immediate, unappealable. Daniel got a call from his school's principal. He was being placed on administrative leave, just until this whole situation clears up, I'm sure you understand. And Lily, God Lily, she came home from school crying, signing frantically. The kids said mean things. They said Miss Elena is a bad person. They said she's only pretending to be our friend. Is that true, Daddy? Is Miss Elena bad? Daniel held his daughter while she sobbed, and his heart broke in ways he didn't know were still possible. That night, after Lily finally fell asleep, Elena sat on Daniel's couch and made a decision. I should leave, she signed. Her face was expressionless, but her hands trembled. If I disappear, Victor wins against me, but he leaves you alone. You get your job back. Lily stops getting bullied. You can have your normal life. Elena, no. This is my fault, all of it. I brought this into your lives. I should never have stopped. Daniel grabbed her hands. Look at me, she looked. You don't get to make that decision for us. You don't get to decide what we're willing to fight for. Lily loves you. And we don't abandon people we love because it gets hard. This isn't hard, Daniel. This is dangerous. Victor Hale destroys people. He has money, lawyers, connections. He can crush us without breaking a sweat. Then we find a way to crush him first. You don't understand. You're right. I don't understand billions of dollars and corporate warfare, but I understand something he doesn't. I understand what it means to have nothing to lose but the people you love. He took my job. Fine. He froze your accounts. We'll figure it out, but he doesn't get to take our family. Not without a fight. Elena stared at him. This school teacher, this widowed single father, this ordinary man who signed with his whole heart. You have no idea what you're signing up for, she told him. Then teach me. The next morning, Elena made phone calls she hadn't made in years to lawyers who owed her favors, to journalists she had helped before, to former Helixson employees who had been pushed out like her. She met with them in secret, gathering evidence, building a case, and then she called a press conference, not as Elena Brooks, the quiet bookstore employee, as Elena Thornton, co-founder of Helixson Group and the woman who was about to blow the whistle on one of the biggest privacy scandals in tech history. But first she had to tell Daniel the whole truth. There's something else she signed the night before the press conference, something I haven't told you. More secrets, the last one. She took a deep breath. I'm worth $2.3 billion. At least I was before Victor froze my accounts. I own properties in 6 countries. I have enough money to buy this entire town 10 times over. I've sat across from senators and CEOs and people whose names you'd recognize from headlines. She watched Daniel's face, looking for the moment when everything would change. And I hate all of it, she continued. Every dollar came from a company that betrayed its users. Every property reminds me of what I helped build. Every connection is to someone who only cared about what I could do for them. When my mother died, I realized that all that money couldn't save her, couldn't even give me comfort. I had everything and nothing at the same time. That's why you came here, Daniel signed, to escape, to find something real, something that wasn't about money or power or image, and I found you. She laughed bitterly. And then I dragged you into the exact world I was running from. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he signed. Money doesn't protect people. It just exposes them. Elena nodded. Tomorrow I'm going to expose Victor, everything he's done, every law he's broken, every person he's hurt. And when I do, my life as Elena Brooks is over. The quiet bookstore employee will be gone. There will be cameras and questions and chaos. Our life here, this peaceful thing we've built, it ends. Then we build a new one. Daniel signed. Together. You're sure? Once I do this, there's no going back. Elena. Daniel took her face in his hands, making sure she was looking directly at him. Then he signed. I didn't fall in love with a billionaire or a bookstore employee or any identity you wear like armor. I fell in love with you. The woman who signs like she's painting pictures in the air. The woman who makes my daughter laugh until she can't breathe. The woman who survived the worst night of her life and came out stronger. That woman, she doesn't disappear just because her name changes. Elena's eyes filled with tears. I don't deserve you. She signed. Probably not, Daniel replied with a small smile. But you're stuck with me anyway. The congressional hearing on privacy rights was supposed to be routine, testimony from experts, statements from advocacy groups, the usual political theater. Then Elena Thornton walked in. The room went silent. Camera flashes exploded like lightning. Reporters scrambled for positions. Elena walked to the witness table alone. No interpreter, no voiceover. Just her hands. My name is Elena Thornton, she signed, her movements slow and deliberate. I am deaf. I am a co-founder of Helixson Group, and I am here to testify about crimes committed against the deaf community by my former company and its current CEO, Victor Hale. In the gallery, Victor Hale sat with his lawyers, a smirk playing on his lips. He signed something to his assistant. This is adorable. Let her have her moment. But his smirk faded as Elena began presenting evidence, internal emails showing deliberate exploitation of deaf users' data, contract records proving Marcus Reed was on Helixson's payroll, testimonies from former employees confirming illegal surveillance programs, financial documents showing payments to politicians who blocked disability privacy laws. Elena's hands moved with precision, each sign a weapon. The interpreter provided voice for the congressional record, but everyone in the room was watching Elena's hands. Victor Hale's lawyers objected, called the evidence fabricated, demanded Elena be removed. But Elena had one more piece of evidence. 2 years ago my mother died of a stroke, she signed. What I didn't know until recently was that Helixson's surveillance systems had been monitoring her, studying her movements, her vital signs, tracking the deterioration of her health as data for a predictive algorithm. They knew she was at risk. They could have warned someone, but her death was worth more to them as data. The room went absolutely silent. Victor Hale watched my mother die, Elena continued, and turned her death into a product. Victor shot to his feet, face purple with rage. This is ridiculous. She has no proof of off. But Elena was already pulling up records on the screen behind her. Her mother's name, the data files, the timestamps, and then she did something no one expected. She stopped signing. She stood in complete silence, letting the weight of what she had revealed fill the room. For a long moment no one spoke. No one moved. The entire chamber held its breath, and then slowly, people began putting down their phones, closing their laptops, giving Elena their complete undivided attention, because for the first time they understood. This was how Elena experienced the world, every single day, in silence, reading faces, watching hands, fighting to be seen, and in that moment they saw her. Victor Hale was arrested 3 days later. The charges included conspiracy to commit stalking, unauthorized surveillance, and exploitation of protected disability data. His lawyers tried to negotiate, but the evidence was overwhelming. Marcus Reed, facing his own charges, made a deal. He testified about everything: the payments, the instructions, the plan to silence Elena permanently. Helixson Group's stock collapsed within hours of the hearing. Investors fled. Partners severed ties. The company that had once been worth billions became a cautionary tale. When reporters asked Elena if she would take back control of Helixson, she shook her head. That company was built on exploitation, she signed. I don't want to fix it, I want to replace it. She announced that her shares would be liquidated, and the proceeds donated to create a new foundation, one focused on deaf advocacy, privacy rights, and technology that served users instead of exploiting them. I'm not interested in power, she signed at the press conference. I'm interested in protection, for people like me, for people like my daughter. A reporter raised their hand. Your daughter? Elena smiled, the first real smile anyone had seen from her since the hearing began. I'm marrying a wonderful man, she signed. He has a little girl named Lily. She's going to be deaf someday, and when that day comes, I'm going to make sure the world is ready for her. After it was over, after the arrests and the headlines and the chaos, Elena collapsed, not physically, but something inside her just stopped. She had been running on adrenaline for months, fighting a war she wasn't sure she could win, and now that she had won, she didn't know what to do next. For days she barely got out of bed. She couldn't eat, couldn't sign, couldn't face Daniel or Lily or anyone. Daniel found her one evening, curled up on her couch in the dark, staring at nothing. He didn't try to fix her, didn't offer solutions, or encouragement, or any of the well-meaning phrases that people use when they don't know what else to say. He just sat down beside her and held her hand. They stayed like that for hours. Eventually Lily appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes sleepily. Daddy, is Miss Elena having a sad day? Yes, sweetheart. She's very tired. Lily padded over to the couch and climbed up next to Elena. She didn't say anything, just snuggled in close, her small body warm against Elena's side. And then she signed, slowly and carefully, the way Elena had taught her. We don't need to win. We just need to be together. Elena looked at this child, this beautiful, brave little girl, who would face her own silent world someday, and felt something crack open inside her. Not breaking, healing. She pulled Lily closer and signed back. You're right, that's all that matters. 1 year later, autumn evening, Maple Street Cafe, the same table by the window. Elena sat across from Daniel, their hands intertwined on the table. Lily was arranging her chicken nuggets into a smiley face, just like she had the night they first met. But everything was different now. It had happened 3 months ago, the moment Daniel finally understood. He had been going through old mail, cleaning out a drawer he'd been ignoring for months, insurance statements, medical bills, school notices, and then he found it, a letter from Lily's audiologist that he had somehow missed. Dear Mr. Hart, we are pleased to confirm that all costs associated with Lily's treatment have been covered by the Thornton Family Foundation. Thornton. Daniel had stared at that name for a long time, then he pulled out his phone and searched it. Elena Thornton, co-founder of Helixson Group, net worth $2.3 billion, last known location unknown. The photo that came up was Elena, his Elena, the woman who worked part-time at a bookstore, the woman who wore simple clothes and drove an old car, the woman who had cried in his arms and said she had no one left in the world. That night, after Lily went to bed, Daniel drove to Elena's apartment. She opened the door and immediately knew something had changed. The way he looked at her, the letter crumpled in his hand. You know, she signed. It wasn't a question. I know. They stood in silence for a long moment. Elena braced herself for anger, for accusation, for the inevitable question everyone asked when they discovered who she really was. What do you want from me? But Daniel didn't ask that. He was quiet for what felt like an eternity. Elena could see him processing, the gears turning behind his eyes, as he reconciled the woman he knew with the information on the page. She braced herself. This was usually the moment when things fell apart, when people started calculating what they could get from her, when warmth turned to wariness, or worse, to the particular kind of friendliness that came with dollar signs attached. The hearing aids, Daniel said finally, his voice strange, not angry, not excited, just careful. Elena didn't respond. Lily's hearing aids, the purple ones that arrived out of nowhere. He looked up from the letter. That was you. It wasn't a question. The school funding, he continued. The anonymous donor who saved the inclusive education program. That was you too. Elena nodded slowly. The specialist appointment. The one we'd been waiting 8 months for that suddenly had an opening. Another nod. The speech therapy sessions. The sensory toys that arrived for her birthday from a family friend I couldn't identify. The scholarship application that got mysteriously expedited. Elena felt tears building behind her eyes. She had been so careful, so thorough. She had covered her tracks the way she used to cover financial transactions, through shell companies and anonymous trusts and plausible deniability. But Daniel had noticed. Of course he had noticed. He noticed everything. How long, he asked. How long have you been doing this? Since the beginning, Elena signed, her hands barely steady enough to form the words. Since the night in the cafe. Daniel set the letter down on the kitchen table. He walked to the window and stood there for a long moment, looking out at the dark street. Elena waited. You know what the worst part of Amelia dying was, he said finally, not turning around. It wasn't the grief. It wasn't the loneliness. It wasn't even watching Lily ask every night when mommy was coming home. He turned to face her. The worst part was accepting help. Everyone wanted to help. Casseroles, and sympathy cards, and offers to babysit. And I hated it. Every single gesture, because it reminded me that I wasn't enough, that I couldn't take care of my own daughter without charity from other people. Elena felt her heart sinking. I know I have too much pride, Daniel continued. I know it's a character flaw. Amelia used to yell at me about it all the time. She'd say, Daniel Hart, letting people love you is not the same as admitting defeat. But I couldn't help it. I needed to prove that I could do this, that Lily would be okay because I made her okay, not because someone felt sorry for us. I didn't feel sorry for you, Elena signed. I never felt sorry for you. Then why? Daniel asked. Why do all of this in secret? Why not just tell me, give me the chance to accept or refuse? Because I knew you'd refuse. Elena's hands were moving faster now, driven by emotion. I saw the way you carried yourself, the way you talked about providing for Lily, the pride in your eyes when you mentioned working extra hours to afford her appointments. I knew that if you found out the money came from me, you would reject it, all of it, even if it meant Lily suffered. Daniel flinched. I couldn't let that happen, Elena continued. You saved my life, Daniel. You saw me when no one else could. You made me feel human again when I had forgotten what that felt like. And all I wanted, all I have ever wanted, is to give something back, to make your life a little easier the way you made mine bearable. By lying to me, by protecting your pride while still protecting your daughter. Elena's signs were sharp now, frustrated. You think I didn't struggle with this? You think I didn't lie awake at night wondering if I was doing the right thing? But every time I considered telling you, I imagined the look on your face, the way you would pull back, the way you would insist on paying me back or not accepting charity. And I couldn't bear it. I couldn't bear watching you suffer for the sake of pride when I had the means to help. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. You should have told me, he said finally. You're right, Elena agreed. I should have. And I'm sorry for the deception. But I am not sorry for helping Lily. I will never be sorry for that. Instead he signed slowly, carefully, like he was trying to understand something that didn't quite make sense. The hearing aids, the school funding, the specialist appointments, Lily's therapy program, the anonymous donations that kept showing up exactly when we needed them most. He paused. That was all you. Elena nodded. There was no point in lying anymore. Why? Daniel asked. Why would you do all this for us? You didn't even know us. Elena's hands trembled slightly as she signed back. You helped a stranger. When you thought she was nobody. When you had nothing to gain. When everyone else looked away. You saw me. She paused, her eyes filling with tears. You saved my life before you knew my name, Daniel. This was just me returning the favor. Daniel was quiet for a long time, processing, recalculating, trying to fit this new information into the woman he thought he knew. You could have told me, he finally signed. Would you have let me help if you knew? He didn't answer. They both knew the truth. Daniel would have refused every cent, would have insisted on paying his own way, even if it meant drowning in medical bills. That stubborn pride was part of who he was. I didn't want your money, he signed eventually. I wanted you, just you, the woman in the cafe, the woman who taught my daughter to sign, the woman who made me feel something again when I thought that part of me had died. And now, Elena asked, her hands barely moving, now that you know I'm not just that woman. Daniel stepped closer, took her hands in his, stilling them. Then he spoke out loud, something he rarely did when signing was an option, because he wanted her to read his lips, to see his face, to understand that he meant every word. "You're still that woman," he said. "The money doesn't change who you are. It doesn't change what you did for us. It doesn't change how I feel." He lifted his hands and signed the rest. "I fell in love with someone who showed up at the worst moment of her life, and still found a way to be kind. Someone who could have bought her way out of trouble but chose to trust a stranger instead. Someone who helped my daughter without ever asking for credit." He paused. "That's who you are, Elena. Not the number in your bank account." Elena let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. "You're not angry?" "I'm a little angry," Daniel admitted with a small smile. "You could have just told me. I would have eventually maybe accepted it." Elena laughed, a real laugh wet with tears. "No, you wouldn't." "No," he agreed. "I wouldn't, but I would have tried. For you." He pulled her into his arms then, and Elena buried her face in his chest, feeling for the first time in years like she didn't have to carry everything alone. "Thank you," she signed, when she finally pulled back. "For not running." "Thank you," he replied, "for thinking we were worth saving." Now 3 months later, sitting in the cafe where it all began, Daniel still sometimes looked at Elena like he couldn't quite believe she was real, like he was waiting to wake up from a dream, but he had stopped questioning it, stopped trying to make sense of how a panicked woman running from a stalker had turned into the love of his life. Some things he had learned didn't need explaining, they just needed accepting. Elena wasn't running anymore, wasn't hiding, wasn't pretending to be someone she wasn't. She was just Elena, wife, mother, advocate, survivor. Lily's hearing had declined over the past year. She needed hearing aids now, sparkly ones covered in stickers that she called her magic ears. Some days were harder than others, but she wasn't afraid. "Daddy, watch," Lily signed, her little fingers moving with increasing confidence. "Miss Elena taught me how to say I love my family in sign language." She demonstrated, her face scrunched with concentration. "Family, love, mine." Elena felt tears prick her eyes. She reached out and adjusted Lily's hand position slightly. "Almost perfect," she signed. "Like this." Lily beamed. Then she turned to Daniel and said, "See, Daddy, I told you I'd learn all the words." Daniel laughed and pulled both of his girls into a hug. Through the window Elena could see the street where she had once run in terror. The same lampposts, the same sidewalk, but it looked different now, warmer, safer. She thought about fate, about all the coincidences that had to align perfectly for them to find each other. If she hadn't left her phone at home, if she had chosen a different cafe, if Daniel hadn't learned sign language for his brother, if any single element had been different, they never would have met, but they had, and in finding each other they had found something more. A family built not on blood or money or power, but on understanding, on choice, on the quiet language of hands that speaks directly to the heart. "Miss Elena?" Lily signed, interrupting her thoughts. "Can I ask you something? Anything. When I can't hear anymore, will the world be really quiet? Will I be scared?" Elena knelt down so she was eye level with Lily. "The world will be different," she signed. "Not quiet exactly, just different. And sometimes different is scary at first. But you know what? You won't be alone. You'll have your daddy. And you'll have me. And you'll have a whole community of people who understand exactly what you're feeling. And will help you discover that being deaf isn't the end of anything. It's just the beginning of a different kind of beautiful." Lily nodded solemnly. Then her face brightened. "Can deaf people still eat chicken nuggets?" Elena laughed, a full, genuine laugh that seemed to surprise even her. "Deaf people can do anything," she signed, "even eat chicken nuggets shaped like smiley faces." "Good," Lily replied, already turning back to her plate, "because that's the most important thing." Daniel met Elena's eyes across the table, and something passed between them. Not words, not signs, just understanding. The silence between them was full of everything they didn't need to say. Elena looked at Daniel, at Lily, at this small family that had become her whole world. She thought about that terrifying night 1 year ago. The panic, the desperation, the moment she burst through those cafe doors convinced that no one would ever understand her, and then a stranger had raised his hands and changed everything. Not because he knew she was a billionaire, not because he expected anything in return, not because helping her would benefit him in any way. He did it because she needed help, and he could give it. That was all. Elena had spent years in boardrooms surrounded by people who calculated every kindness, who weighed every favor against potential returns, who never gave without expecting something back. She had grown so used to that world that she had almost forgotten another kind existed, but Daniel had reminded her. And now, watching him laugh at something Lily signed, watching his eyes crinkle at the corners the way they always did when his daughter made him smile, Elena understood something she wished the whole world could learn. Kindness doesn't ask for credentials. It doesn't check bank accounts. It doesn't wait for the right moment or the perfect recipient. It just acts.
And sometimes, not always, but sometimes the people who change our lives the most do it before they even know who we are. Daniel had saved a stranger that night, and in doing so he had saved himself too. That was the thing about kindness, Elena realized. It never moves in just one direction. It ripples outward, touching lives in ways we can never predict, coming back to us in forms we never expected. A man helps a frightened woman in a cafe. A woman helps his daughter prepare for a silent future. A little girl learns that different doesn't mean less. And somehow, against all odds, 3 broken people become a family. Not because of money, not because of power, not because anyone planned it that way, just because someone chose to be kind when it would have been easier to look away. And maybe, just maybe, the smallest kindness you give today could change someone's life tomorrow. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that sometimes the darkest moments lead to the most beautiful connections, hit that subscribe button and leave a comment. Tell me about a time when someone understood you when no one else could, or a time when a stranger became something more. Your stories matter. I read every single one. Sometimes the comments become part of the story too. Until next time,